Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the third day of the Quality Week 2021, organized by the Colombo Quality Camp. So we are so excited to have all of you here today. Now, I would like to welcome our resource persons today. We have two speakers joined with us. Firstly, Chaminda Vitanage, Director, Process and Compliance, 99X. Chaminda works in the capacity of a process consultant and has 15 plus experience in industrial software development, quality assurance, and process management disciplines with international exposure in Norway, Sweden, and USA. Also, I would like to welcome Mihiri Lekamge, Senior QA lead from 99X. Mihiri has 7+ years of experience in managing test teams and 15 plus experience in CRM domain quality audits, and also she has a wide array of knowledge in developing quality standards, GDPR implementation, and testing. So this evening, they will be taking us through on privacy assurance. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Chaminda and Mihiri. Over to you.
So good evening, everyone. I believe all of you are having a great time today. So in this third session of the Quality Week, we'll be discussing the quality assurance in privacy management domain, hence the topic quality assurance. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard the term GDPR already, and that you are aware of the risks to your product or the business if you don't comply, right? The resulting legal, cybersecurity, reputational, and financial risks could be very high or catastrophic sometimes. And so today in this session, we will look into a few guidelines and best practices with relate to privacy assurance, so that you can hopefully avoid some of these risks. Most importantly, that potential 20 million euro fine, right? That's huge. A quick disclaimer. So neither me nor Mihiri are legal professionals, and the content we present in this session should be used only as a guideline. And if you are unsure about the requirements of the regulation, you may seek professional legal advice. Right. So let's take a quick look at the agenda for today for the first session. So first, we will discuss a couple of important concepts widely being used in the privacy domain. And then we will look at different privacy regulations available in different parts of the world. But our focus would be on GDPR. And then here in the third topic, we will discuss how the GDPR regulatory requirements are mapped to a software product management, which is our focus. And this big picture, which I mentioned earlier, has three pieces in it. That's the way that I have put it, right? So the first piece talks about the basics, right? And then the second piece talked about the product management, including privacy assurance in it. And the third and the last piece will be a little bit about the support, the processes required for software product management, including the quality assurance, right? So let's first go into the first topic, which is the concepts. So probably you already have seen these two concepts, right? Privacy and data protection. Both of these concepts often comes together, but they do not represent the same thing, right? So there's a subtle difference. It's very important that we understand the difference between these two terms before we move further, right? So to do that, let's look at some of the definitions, right? The first one, data privacy is implemented in policies as part of a governance structure in a company, right? On the other hand, data protection is mostly the procedural controls, right? So policy and procedure. And also data privacy is about what people lawfully can and should do with one's personal data. And data protection ensures that your data is safeguarded from unlawful access. So it's lawful versus unlawful, right? Third definition is data privacy is about keeping your information from being sold or shared, right? While data protection focuses on keeping that information from hackers, right? And another definition, when you look at it, you will see that data privacy controls are mostly given to the users, right? So controlled by the users, whereas the data protection related controls are, mostly, responsibility of a company, right? So there are other, various definitions, but whatever the definition you take, if we summarize, you will see that the privacy is the user's perspective, right? And data protection, on the other hand, becomes a product or the company's perspective. So there are, this is about looking at the same thing from two different perspectives. I think for us to become good privacy assurance engineers or quality assurance engineers, we need both the perspectives, right? So that is the key point here. So I have given here a sort of a question mark, right? And we already saw that the data protection is about safeguarding the data already obtained, right? Because of that, because of this, we often ignore that privacy practice comes before the question of protection, right? We have to protect personal data because someone has already submitted it, right? So I think all of you will agree with me that one of the first steps as a privacy engineer, quality engineer, is to ask this question, right? We have to raise this question: do we really require this personal data in the application, right? So this is a very important question that you need to have in your mind throughout the application development stages. And this is something for you to think about it, because we will come back to this question later in the session also, right? Yes, so now we looked at the concepts, and now we are moving to the second topic of the agenda, which is sort of look at some different data protection regulations available for us in the world. Data protection laws are essential for the protection of human rights, most obviously the right to privacy, right? And these regulations ensure that users' privacy requests are carried out by the companies, and companies are responsible to take measures to protect these personal data, right? So there are different personal data protection regulations in different parts of the world, as I said earlier. Some examples are, of course, the most famous one, everyone talks about it, EU GDPR regulation, right? And there's a UK GDPR version, somewhat similar to EU version. And Singapore has a Personal Data Protection Act, right? And Australia has a Privacy Act. And also Sri Lanka is now having a draft, still a draft Personal Data Protection Act, but pretty soon I think it will become a law. The last I saw in the news is that the cabinet has given the nod, right? So that I think it will, next step is to put to the parliament and debate, and it will become a law. So, not sure when it will come out, right? The way things are happening, but I think it will come sooner or later. It will come. So so this is another point I think that we need to be aware, especially for those of you who are working in software products, where you sell locally, right? And if you are processing personal information, this is going to be a big change in your product. So I recommend you get a copy of this draft and then start reading now itself, so that you will better prepare once the law is out, right? Of course, they will give a a grace period for you to adapt, like the GDPR also like that, they give 2 years for you to comply. But it's always good to be prepared. Mm. Out of all of these regulations, there are many other regulations in the world. I just gave few based on my experience, right? And out of all of these regulations, GDPR, EU GDPR is the most stringent, right? That is given, and therefore it is always advisable to keep GDPR as a base. Same goes with rest of my presentation today as well. I will base my discussion going forward on the GDPR regulation, right? Yeah, so now we looked at few regulations, and let's take a look at the big picture in terms of the GDPR regulation, and to understand its structure and how it can be applied to software product management, right? Now, if you look at the GDPR regulation, if you have already, have a copy, if you have gone through it, maybe you would know. If you haven't, but please, I encourage all of you to have a copy of that too, right? And then if you open that, you will see there are the compliance requirements are given in 99 articles, right? And the 99 placeholders now you are seeing on the screen represents these articles, right? Just assume that each box here is one article, right? Now, out of these 99, not all are directly applicable to software product management, right? So based on our experience, we have realized that these highlighted 56 articles are directly applicable for software product management. When I say software product management, I mean the entire software development process, including the support processes of the company as well, right? So this is the entire application, right? So now we have, we had 99 articles, we have narrowed it down to 56, right? So now let's map these 56 articles into software product management, right? I would like to categorize these 56 articles into 3 bases: basics, product, and process, right? So on top of the basics, these are the articles that everyone in the company should know about at a minimum, right? Regardless of your track, your designation, whatever, right? If GDPR is applicable for your company, it's a must that you at least understand the basics of these articles, right? The general provisions, articles 1 to 4, right, which sets the background for the regulation. And Article 4 is special. It has definitions for certain terms in GDPR, like data controller, data processor, what is data, pseudonymization, things like that, right? So if not the entire regulation, I think all of you quality assurance engineers, you must have at least a copy of this definition so that you can refer, right, anytime. And on top of product, some requirements falls under functional requirements, and there are certain article requirements would fall under non-functional requirements, right? So privacy principles, article 5 to 11, rights of data subjects, articles 12 to 23, specific processing, articles 85 to 89, gives some very good product features that you can straight away test, right, as functional tests. And the things comes under privacy by design and privacy by default, article 25, and the processing of security, article 32, are mostly the non-functional type of requirements where the technical team has to implement right from the beginning, right? Which has to be as part of the architecture and part of the design and so on, and the code itself, right? So that is the categorization for product. So as I said earlier, all of these articles on top of product, right, on top of product, are applicable to the entire software development lifecycle, right? So it involves the business analysis part, the design, development, testing, and deployment, and everything, right? And now if you go to the process side of it, right, there are many articles which I will not go into details right now. And if your company is a data controller, you have these specific controls, and if you are a processor, you have these two specific articles applicable to you, right? And please note that this mapping that you are seeing on the screen now, right, is not something given in the GDPR regulation, right? So this is something that we have done based on our experience in our company, and you can use this as a guideline. But if you dig deep and go into the individual requirement level of these articles, you can have a even better picture, right? So you can have a very fine mapping. So you are welcome to try that, right? But you can use this as a guideline. Yes, so now, yeah, so this is the big picture. Now we have looked at the big picture of the regulation, the structure, and then we have narrowed it down to 56 articles, and then we have put it, mapped it into operations main parts of a software company, right? And now let's go into the basics, things cover under basics, right? So this is the same big picture, and our focus now is this section, basics. But again, we don't have enough time to go through all of the requirements, right? But no regulatory discussion is complete unless you don't know the penalties, right? So let's put some focus on the penalties. And before that, I will also quickly touch some definitions. Especially, we talked about 3 roles in the regulation. One is data subject, the other is data controller, and the other is the data processor, right? As I said earlier, Article 4 gives you these definitions. You can go and read, but I will try to explain that, for the benefit of those who are new to the concept, with a scenario, right? So you have the data subject or the end customer, right? This is a person who resides in EU, right? Basically a citizen. And say this person is submitting his or her personal data to an enterprise service provider like a bank, right? To get some service, right? That is a typical thing. So now the bank becomes a data controller, because the bank decides what to do with the personal data, and the operations and the processing, everything is decided by the bank in order to give back the service, right? So it's very clear now the data controller is the bank, right? Now suppose the bank has purchased, right, the software what they are using from a software vendor, right? So this software vendor might become a data processor, right? I stress the word might. Just because they purchase a software product from a vendor doesn't make them a data processor, right? Say, for example, there's a bug in the banking system, and now the data controller wants the assistance from the software vendor, right, to fix the bug, because bank don't have the capability inside. So then in that process, if the software vendor is getting exposed to personal data, then the software vendor becomes a data processor, right? And similarly, say if this application is cloud hosted, and then automatically the cloud service provider becomes a data processor, because they hold the data anyway, right? In their infrastructure, they save their data, and they may be backing up their data on behalf of the data controller, right? So the cloud service provider automatically become a data processor, right? And if the software vendor here has an outsourcing party somewhere, maybe in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, right? Like most of our companies, um, we might become a data sub-processor too, right? I'm stressing the word again, might, because if our teams here get exposed to personal data, maybe while testing or debugging or fixing and testing a production issue, then we become a data sub-processor too, right? So this is how you have to map it and then understand what your role, right, or basically what is your company's role. So it's very vital that you understand this concept and know exactly what is your role, right? Because depending on the role, the requirements of the regulations are also sometimes different, right? um, So, having said that, let's move on to this Article 83, which talks about the general conditions for imposing administrative fines. Right here, the article says, if you violate Articles 8, 11, 25, and 39, you can, be fined up to 10 million euros, or 2% of your total worldwide revenue, whichever is the highest. And the fines become double if you violate these articles, right? So it's very important you go and read this particular Article 83 and realize the penalties, right? It'll always help your company, and as well as your the end customer as well. Um, so breach incidents, right? So we have to pay fines if we have a breach incident, right? And breach incidents are actually a good way to learn also, right? I mean, we should not hope that people will make mistakes and we can learn out of it, but it happens. It's the incidents are there recorded, right? It's we can utilize them for us to learn, right? And then maybe fix our issues, right? For example, this incident that I've taken from internet, you can see this is a very recent incident. The date of decision is last month, 26th of October, right, this year. And the fine imposed is 16,000 euros, right? And it has violated the article number 35, right? And if you pay attention to this incident summary, right, it says this Spanish data processing authority has imposed a fine on this particular company. The company has installed 5 terminals with the fingerprint control system to record its employees' working hours. In doing so, the company has had failed to conduct a data protection impact assessment, right? And this violates Article 35. For this reason, the fine was 16,000 euros, right? So now actually you will see that these things are really happening, and then the companies are getting fined. I mean, this is only 16,000 euros, right? If you go in this list and search, you will see thumping amount of fines are being imposed on companies, and some companies actually has gone bankrupt paying these fines, right? So I think it's our duty as quality assurance engineers to ensure that we understand these requirements and ensure that these things are incorporated into the system, so that none of these parties, either processor or the sub processor or the controller, has to pay these huge fines, right? um, and looking into some other statistics from the same source, you will see here the cost of overall sums of fines starting from 2018, where the GDPR first come into play. By October 2021, you can see the amount of increase, right, in the overall sum of fines, right? And then here you will see the overall number of fines, right? You can see the increase, right? So these things are telling us a story, right? And some statistics by country, total sum of fines. The Luxembourg has paid the most amount of fines. And also total number of fines by country, Spain, right? One we just looked at. So you can see all of these statistics. Please visit this website, enforcementtracker.com, right? This is a good website maintained by I think a legal firm from Australia. They are maintaining it and tracking it. Very up-to-date information is available. This is not the only place where you can learn, but there are many other places. But this is something that we use very commonly within our company, right? Yes. So now we looked at the basics, and then look at the product, right? Very quickly, the product part of it, right? We looked at the basics and come to the we'll come to the product part. But with the interest of time, we will not have enough time to go through all of these requirements, right? The important thing to understand is there's a division between functional and non-functional. The functional requirements can be tested as features, and non-functional requirements has to be tested along with some technical support, right? So I'll quickly run through these functional type of articles. Will not have time to spend on these things, because Mihiri also in her session will go into some of the case studies on these these functional testing type articles, right? So Article 5 discusses about 6 principles. Lawfulness, right? Your processing has to be lawfulness, purpose, limitation, and data minimization. So this data minimization, it says that we need to use the the minimum amount of data. Remember the question that we asked earlier: do we really need this data in the system, right? So this is that, right? And then the accuracy of data, storage limitation, and of course security, right? So security is also a principle now, right? So that means the information security also now is becoming a legal requirement along with GDPR, right? So you can see how serious this is, right? And on top of this, it Article 5 also says that the controller is accountable, right, for implementing these, right? So sometimes if you are a processor or sub-processor, you might think that we don't need to worry about it because it's the controller's accountability. But you need to think that the product you are building as a processor or sub-processor will be ultimately used by a controller, right? So if it does not support the GDPR requirements, that controller might not buy your product and will go to a competitor, right? So therefore there's no going out of this, right? You have to think from the controller's perspective also, and do your quality assurance activities, right? And then article number 6 talks about lawfulness of processing, right? Where it again gives us 6 options as lawfulness, as lawful processing, right? You have to take either consent from the data subject, or based on a contractual obligation of the data subject, or a legal obligation of the controller, or because of vital interest of the data subject, right? Or interest of the public, right? General public, or legitimate interest of the controller, right? So all of these things. And then Article 7 takes a deeper look into the conditions for consent, right? The consent should be clearly distinguishable, intelligible, easily accessible, and clear, and in clear and plain language, and easy to withdraw, right? And it also says the controller should be able to demonstrate the consent, right? Say if there's an incident reported like what we saw earlier in the enforcement tracker, right? And if there's an investigation, if the authorities will ask, okay, we need to see proof, whether that you have taken consent from the data subject, then you should be able to go back and say, okay, at this and this, such and such a date, such and such a time, this particular person has given the consent in this manner, right? So these are the things that you should test, right, in the application. Yes. And then Article 12 to 22 describes a series of rights of data subjects. Again, you can very straightforward, you can test all of these things as features in your product, right? So again, I'm not going into details because Mihiri will also touch these things, right? So non-functional side of it, Article 25 talks about privacy by design, right? Where it says that the controller is responsible for implementation of technical measures right from the design stage itself. And privacy by default says, by default, the application should give the most strictest possible, privacy controls, right? So by default, you should not open up all the privacy information about the data subject, right? You should give as minimum as possible. If the data subject wants to give more, then it has to be based on that person's consent only, right? So here the article says, when you are implementing the privacy requirements, you have to consider state of the art, cost of the implementation, and the scope and context of the purpose, and also the risk to the data subject, right? So you can see here, you can weigh between the risk to the data subject and the cost of the implementation, and then you can make a decision, right? But the important thing is you need to maintain the evidence of all of these decisions, because you never know when you will have to prove this to the authorities, right? So these are the things that the quality assurance engineer also need to be aware of and check, right, carefully. um, and article 32 talks about the security of processing, and it also says, similar to privacy techniques, you have to consider state of the art, cost, scope and context of the purpose of the processing, and risks to the data subject, right? And then implement various security controls into the application, which might be, mostly non-functional type of testing that you need to do, right? So now we looked at these requirements, right, which are applicable to a product, and how now what we do, right? What do we do with this? How to approach our test strategy, right? So the best way to start is with this question that we asked earlier, where we need to get all the personal data list with us, right? And then you get the team, get all the important stakeholders like your product owners, business analysts, architects, QA leads, and everyone. And then you have to ask this question: do we really need all of this data in the application, right? And right, and then you have to ask that question, and then do a personal data journey map, right? Where plot where the personal data will move throughout the application. You need to look at every possible option, right? Even things like when you are at a later stage, when you are reporting a defect, sometimes you might have to take a screenshot and attach. If that screenshot has a personal information, right, then so this is also part of the journey, no? Right? Your that personal information goes into your defect system, and it might go to a few other people, right? So you need to think all of these things, and maybe you will decide at this discussion, if it is personal information related, we will not take screenshots and attach, right? So that is the importance of this discussion, right? And then of course you will come up with risks, right? Based on the journey map, you have to see the risks to personal data, based on where it goes. And of course you have to ask this question again, this the risk in terms of the data subject, how will this affect to the data subject, right? And then you will prioritize the risks. Again, you have to discuss this with the customer, what to implement, what not to implement. And then of course there's something that we often forget: we have to start drafting a privacy policy also for the product, right? This is a requirement in the GDPR, where you have to communicate certain information about your policy to the data subject, and it has to be available with the product, or maybe in the company's website, but it has to be specifically with relate to this processing of this product. Sometimes I've seen many customers, they generalize it and put it, right? But it's always good that if you can have a specific policy, whether to publish it or not, their job, but at least it should be available for the team, the development team, because it acts as a good source of requirement for you. And I would like to link this so that it you have to perform it few times as a cycle. So you will see the most important outcomes are your list of risks and the privacy policy. So you can use your privacy policy and the risks and the GDPR regulation itself, because the regulation also your source of requirements, right? It is one of your SRSs, right? That is how you have to look at it, and you should go and read it, right? So it will, right, these three will give you a good set of combination of requirements for you to work on, and based on this you can devise your privacy test strategy as well as personal data protection test strategy, or otherwise your information security test strategy, right? So these are very high level, at a high level, how you can arrive at test strategies, and then you can when you have your test strategy, you can, it's a matter of adding different test cases, and so on, which you will also see in the next session, where Mihiri will take you through on different case studies, right? Yes. So with that, we are coming to the last agenda item, which is the process aspect. With the interest of time again, and now we looked at product. So now we are here. We will look only one item here, which is called the PII data transfer, right? Articles 44 to 46. This is important in case if you are getting exposed to real personal data while testing, right? Yes. So Article 45 says you can transfer data based on this EU recognized list of third countries, right? EU has published this. You can search in Google, right? Unfortunately, Sri Lanka is not one of these countries, so it's not applicable for us, but there are many other countries. You can go and refer that list where you can simply expose data. You don't need any other additional safeguard. So if this does not work for you, then Article 46 gives you an option to transfer data based on an agreement, right? So this agreement has to be signed between the companies. It will have content like additional security safeguards you need to have in place and things like that, right? So you have additional obligations with this agreement, but this is a good option for you to take in case if the data exposure is unavoidable, right? The third option, in case if both of these two are not applicable, then you can go and expose that, take that data out of the EU boundary and expose to outside world based on the consent from the data subject. But there's a one catch here. The regulation says if you are doing this, you have to explain all the risks available to the data subject, right? So it's a very tricky situation. Sometimes when you expose all the risks, the data subject might say, no, I don't want to do this, right? So there are a lot of challenges, but you need to understand these very carefully. When I say you, it's not totally on the testers plate. These things actually belongs to the process side, right? That is why I have categorized this in the process, where the the company's legal division and the process division has to take lead on these things, right? So even though the regulation has given us all of these options to to use real data for our testing, right? I think you will all agree with this, that we have to avoid using real personal data for testing at any cost, right? So sometimes we see the best is to use data masking, right? So that you are safe. Data masking is actually, sometimes we see that the customer give the real data to the Sri Lankan team, for example, and they mask data themselves, right? So this is a violation of the requirement, because you already have seen the data before masking, right? So ideally it has to be masked within EU boundaries and then sent outside, right? And even when you masking, you have to see that sometimes the name will be getting replaced another name. So when you look at the data, you really, you are confused. You don't know whether this is the real name or the mask name, right? So it's best in that case, you have to go and ask from your customer, whoever who gives the data, to ensure whether this is masked. So it's best you enter some, like garbage characters, XYZ or something like that, which doesn't make any sense, right? Yes. So talking about the processes, um, it's always good to use the help of a management system, to cover the process side of the operations. So this particular ISO standard 27701 is specifically for privacy information management, and it has a direct mapping to the GDPR. So this is a good place. If your company already does not have it, maybe you can, give this information to whoever, relevant parties. This will give a good basis for your GDPR compliance, and it covers more all of these controls that we just, ran through. Yes. So with that, I have come to an end of my session. The key takeaway, right? What I would like to stress here, with all of these points that we discussed, the key takeaway for you is that, always see the big picture. You saw how we look at the entire regulation, and then we narrowed it down to, applicable articles, and then we narrowed it further to product management, and then entire company, and then to the software, the process, the product and the process, right? So know your boundaries first, and then start working on the details within, right? So that is my advice and the key takeaway for you. If you have any questions with relate to the topics that I discussed right now, please, I think, put it on to the chat. We will try our best to give you the answers. If we are not able to do that right away, we can always reach out to you if you can leave your contact information. So Sri Lankan privacy regulation is still not in place, so you can just leave your contacts with us. Okay, right. Thank you. With that, I hand over the session to Mihiri. Over to you, Mihiri.
Good evening, everyone. Today, I like to give some insights about privacy testing, possible test design scenarios, plus some test cases. On the complete different note, I use this all-seeing eye for my presentation, and don't assume that I'm a part of the Masonic Club. I just used it for the, keep the interest, right? So, okay. So today's session, I would like to discuss about what is privacy testing, what are the privacy rights and GDPR articles related to them, and feature level verification by explaining system features which complies with GDPR articles, and how to design tests to verify them, and what are the possible test cases. Okay, so first let's see what privacy testing is. Privacy testing is the process of verifying software system compliance with the privacy requirements used to design and the implement the application. It is the primary step to ensure that the system is properly designed to secure the personally identifiable information, which is also shortened as PII and function as required. Privacy testing, this actually the privacy testing should be a part of our typical testing process, just like any other testing type, like maybe performance or security testing. The difference is that the privacy testing is only focuses on the privacy aspects of the application. Privacy testing can be, as Chaminda also mentioned, that we can do this in two levels. One is feature level verification of the product, and the other way is technical verification, like privacy by design, privacy by default, encryption, data masking, and data impact analysis. So today I will explain about the feature level verification related to 8 privacy rights in GDPR. And here are some benefits of privacy testing. It identifies privacy issues, and it gives input for the action required to privacy risk and issues, which it also lead to reduce the costs and establish confidence with stakeholders and collaboration among different parties. Also, this privacy testing acts as an input to the risk management activities as well. So let's see what privacy and what is security. Privacy and security are actually not separated from one another, but actually closely related. While privacy refers to the control you have upon your private information, security refers to how this information is protected. In another way, privacy refers to the rights you have to manage your personal information and how it is used if you share it with other entities, or maybe if collected while surfing online. And security refers how your personal information that we talked about is protected. Uh, this is the overview that Chaminda shared earlier with you all. So I would like to discuss about the rights of data subjects, which covers the articles 12 to 23. Um, User rights in GDPR, that is the topic I'm going to discuss. You heard the term GDPR earlier, so it stands for General Data Protection Regulation. So this GDPR and privacy management go hand in hand together. Privacy is not something that is added externally to application. It should be built in the core architecture and the functionality. So as software teams like us, we should commit to including the privacy at the initial design stages and throughout the complete development process of new products, processes or services that involve processing personal data. This GDPR, this regulation comprises of a set of 8 basic rights given to individuals to protect their private lives and control the use of digital traces they leave behind when using internet. Like these rights are meant to create openness, control, and trust between the parties. So I'm going to discuss about how these rights could be verified in a software system with some example of test designs and possible test cases. In the upcoming slides, I will elaborate a bit about the privacy right, the related article, test design, and the possible test cases. So that is the order I'm going to follow. Okay, the first right, the right to object, covers Article 21. I will elaborate a little bit about the article. The data subject shall have right to object at any time to processing of personal data, where personal data processed for direct marketing purposes. The data subject shall have right to object at any time to processing. So you can see that this is how the consent should be saved in the system upon adding a new person. Legal basis has been chose as the legitimate interest to save person data. I also would like to mention that the system I'm used to work is not save any financial or medical information as personal data. So legitimate interest is the legal basis for this person in this case. It might be different in different cases. So you also can see that the source of this person is import, meaning that this person has been added to the system by some sort of a import process. So the legitimate interest is the most flexible of the GDPR's lawful basis for processing personal data. It actually, if we take technically, it applies whenever an organization uses personal data in a way that data subject would expect. I will discuss more about it later regarding the legitimate interest, why this has been chosen as the legal basis at the end of the session. So when it comes to test design, we can add the functional test. This is the key takeaway from this presentation, I would say, the test design and the test cases, right? So when it comes to test design, we can create functional tests to make sure that the proper customer consent and legal basis has been acquired and stored in the system to handle objections if occur. So the possible test case would be, we could verify that the consent and the legal basis are stored with each user registered within the system. The second right, right to be informed. covering Article 12, 13, and 14. If I describe briefly about the articles, the controller shall take appropriate measures to provide any information related to processing to the data subject in concise, transparent, and easily accessible form using clear and plain language. Information to be provided where personal data are collected from data subject. The identity and the contact details of the controller, the purposes of the processing for which the personal data are intended as, well as the legal basis for the processing. So that is the, I just read the article or the brief description about all the articles. The test design comes as, we could create functional tests, make sure that data subject know his personal data collected, processed, and stored for what purposes before data being collected. So test that we could perform is test to verify that consent is saved upon new person registration. Also some tests to verify that notifications were sent to users when data is processing. So you can see that how the consent, this is how the consent is saved in the system. And the next step example of email notification sent to the user that your data has been stored within our system. So if user has any objection, he can raise at this point, contacting the system by clicking upon the links on the email, right? And the third right, the right to access personal data, which covers Article 15. I will just describe the article again. The data subject shall have right to obtain from controller confirmation as to whether or not personal data concerning him are being processed, and where that is the case, access to the personal data and the following information: the purpose of the processing, the categories of the personal data concerned, to whom the personal data have been disclosed, and how long the data will be stored, and the list goes on. I will stop it from there. And so the important part, the test design, we could create functional tests to make sure that users can access their personal information and know how this information has been obtained and being used by the system. So test cases can be, we can create test cases to perform, make sure that the correct legal basis were acquired and stored in the system, and users can view them according to their rights. Also, tests should be performed to make sure that personal data reports are available and users can view them. Also verify that users can view only their own personal data reports, not others. And also test and we should test and verify that the different user rights on data storing, report generation, and viewing, because this report generation should be limited to some as a admin functionality. Everybody in the system should not be able to generate reports on other person's data. So the above is an example of a report that can generate system to view and store personal information. This is an admin functionality in the system I used to work. So likewise, we have to take care of that kind of things as well when designing the privacy in our systems. The fourth right, the right to correct information, covering Article 16. The data subject shall have right to obtain from the controller that the rectification or inaccurate personal data concerning him. The data subject shall have the right to have incomplete personal data completed, including by means of providing a supplementary statement. So the test design should come as test to make sure that users can change their personal information when necessary. Possible test cases are tests to verify that user requests to change data are properly stored and accepted and follow up. Test to verify that different users have different rights to view and edit and delete their data. Test to verify that revised personal data reports are stored in the system and users were informed. So this is the example I used to show off the user request management portal that we are using right now in our system as a not the part of the core system, as a integration to the core system, user management portal. In this portal, we manage all the requests related to privacy as well. In addition to other service requests, we manage privacy request as well in this user management portal. The fifth right, right to remove, covers Article 17. The data subject shall have the right to obtain from the controller to remove of personal data without any delays under some of the following circumstances. Personal data no longer necessary to the purpose which they collected, if the subject withdraw consent, if the subject objects processing, if personal data unlawfully processed, or if data should be removed from for compliance with legal obligation. The test design comes as we can create functional tests to make sure that person's personal data is deleted from the system after certain time, when system does not have legal basis for keeping it anymore. So possible test cases should be like verify that all person data tracked related to a person, verify that deleting data upon request from a user, either by system administrator or by a user with a correct, verifying that automatic deletion of data when the retention period is over. I'm referring to these are some case studies like systems I used to work with. So these test cases are based on my experience, right? These are not universally correct test cases. These are just to give you an idea. Okay, so this is how it developed in the system I used to work. Admins can create selection of contacts using a search criteria. So several criteria could be used to used to filter relevant people. So after filtering the certain set of people, administrator can delete them in one go, like this, as I marked in red, like delete all contacts. We can delete the relevant set of people. This is not automatically happen. This we have to do it manually in our system right now. And the sixth right is the right to data portability. What is data portability? Data portability is the ability and capacity to export data collected or stored digitally concerning a data subject, and the ability to receive data concerning the data subject and to allow another controller to receive portable data. This discuss about the right of transit personal data to another controller without hindrance from the controller to which personal data have been provided. This transfer should be also technically feasible as well. So the test design comes as we could create functional tests to make sure that users can transfer their data directly from one controller to another using a system. So possible test cases are like we could verify that data is stored in a structured and stored in a machine readable format in the database. Verify that functionality of transferring personal data to another system automatically. Verify the accuracy of data after being transferred, and verify that there was no data loss during the transfer, and they verify that there are no security breaches during the transfer. And the seventh right, the right to restrict processing, which covers Article 18 and 19. This is about data subject shall have the right to restrict of processing data when some of the following applies. If data subject needs to correct or update his data, if the processing is unlawful, if the controller no longer needs the personal data, if the data subject object to processing. So the test design comes as we could create functional tests to make sure that the system can block data processing upon user request. And possible test cases are verify that request to block processing data maintained, follow up and responded properly. verify that block data is not used to process, also verify that the user requests are follow up and responded to the users. For example, like automatic email generation, system push notifications are properly sent to required users at the right time. And the eighth right, the last one, the right not to be subject to automated decision making, which covers the article 22. The article described like this: the data subject have the right to object to process his data and get decisions solely based on this automated processing. This include profiling which produces legal effects concerning him or significantly affects him. Uh, so the test design comes as functional test to make sure that only manual and human processing is happen with the information. So make a note that we can't automate this process. Possible test cases are verify that there are no algorithms or logic used to automate the decision making process. For example, we cannot use artificial intelligence or machine learning language things to uh, the such algorithms to automate the decision making process. It should be done by manually or by a human. It should be happen with human touch, right? So, and the lawfulness of processing, which covers the articles is 6. I added this slide to show you how the lawfulness of the processing has achieved in the current system I'm working on. It is described under the article 6. The article 6 goes as: processing shall be lawful if at least one of the following applies. Processing is necessary for the performance of a contract to which the data subject is party, or in order to take steps at the request of the data subject prior to entering to a contract for compliance with the legal obligation, in order to protect the vital interests of the data subject or of another natural person, for the performance of a task carried out in the public interest, for the purpose of the legitimate interest pursued by the controller or by a third party. Um, Also, this is how the legitimate interest I discussed. If you can remember, I discussed this in the very beginning. The legitimate interest has used to store data and how the system store the consent and inform the data subject. So if we look at about what is legitimate interest, is the most flexible of the GDPR's lawful basis for processing personal data. In general, the condition applies when the processing isn't required by law, but there's a clear benefit to it. There's a little risk of processing intrude on data subjects' privacy, and data subjects should reasonably expect their data to be used in that way. So I hope you can see that this person is by default saved under the legitimate interest legal basis, meaning that the person does not given the consent personally, right? But the system notifies that the person that these information are stored within their system. So if so, and because of the mail notification that the person is getting, he can object if he has any objections to save his personal data to the system. This is also an example from the system I used to work in. Well, yes, that marks the end of the presentation. As Chaminda said, I would also like to answer if you have any questions or clarification now or maybe later as per our knowledge. Right. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chaminda and Mihiri, for that informative and valuable session on a timely topic, as privacy assurance is more and more important during this new normal in the world.